everybody. Welcome to the Big Idea Podcast. My name is Eric Bramlett, and of course I'm joined by
Tammy Melchien.
And it's our special Halloween episode, and we're excited to dress up as different characters. I, as you can see, am dressed up as my brother, Alec.
And I went for some beauty queen costume. This is what I found.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a beauty queen look, without a doubt. Yeah, so why don't we go ahead and get started, and we're talking about a brand new series called Radical Life.
It's going to be radical.
I forgot!
It's perfect. All right, and we're still rolling?
Oh, wow.
All right.
Wasn't that fun?
Boy, that was kooky. So much fun.
That was fun.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
And it's not the funniest thing. That's the strangest thing that's happened
It's
in this
not
office.
the weirdest thing today that we've seen. No, it's fine. I
You don't know
wouldn't-
what I'm talking about.
Yeah, they don't know that Sherry crawled across the floor in a dramatic save of some props for this weekend's service. It was commendable and it was impressive. That's all I'll say about it. We are,
talking
in
about
fact, going to talk about a new series that starts in January.
January.
Radical
Happy New
Life.
Year.
Happy New Year. Get your
Hope-
act together.
Hope you got everything you wanted for Christmas.
Yep. Hope you're going to the gym again. We're excited about that.
Yeah, hold off on that till March. It's
Oh,
too
really?
crowded. Too crowded in January
It is a
and
little
February.
crowded.
Yeah.
Well, you have to go to one of those 24-hour ones, like at 2 in the morning.
No, I
so-
just wait until March when everybody else has quit.
You don't have to wait till March, just FYI. You can go like the third week
I wanna
of
be safe.
January.
I wanna
and
be
You'll be
safe.
totally safe. We are excited about this series, and like last year, this creative content is also shaping our students' winter retreat called Blast. And so they are doing a series called Radical. And new this year, our Kids City for this month of January is also going to be aligning with this creative
Get
content.
out.
Yeah, no, for reals. And so it's almost like 2007 all over again.
Adults, students, and kids doing the
Doing
same
the
big
same
idea.
big idea for the month of
Who
January.
would've thought?
You know what? I certainly assumed it would be like that forever.
So for 1 month, we can pretend that the book is actually out there.
Right, yeah. So now I guess this month would be the month to try to sell more copies.
Yes. Or
Which,
give them away for Christmas.
as someone who's getting like half pennies every 3 months for that book, I would appreciate some more copies being sold. So the big idea for this whole series, Jesus came to usher in a radical, upside-down way of living. So where are we headed with this series, Tammy?
Well, this is a 3C series, but obviously from the title, it can't just be a, hey, let's celebrate by coming together on Sunday morning.
Right, it feels like it would want to be more
Radical.
Yeah.
And so we are going to be talking about a radical life, and the scriptural basis for this is obviously about Jesus, but we decided to focus on things that Jesus taught. And so the centerpieces of each week are going to be either parables or straightforward teaching, things that he said that I think you see these radical ways of living out the 3 C's expressed in.
Very good. All right, well, let's jump right in. So the first week is simply titled A Radical
Life. And it's somewhat of an overview of the series. And so this first week, we will just be talking about how, oftentimes, whether we realize it or not, I think we often try to shape God, shape Jesus into who we want him to be. And use an illustration on the map here of just like at kids, we like to play with Play-Doh, and we would form things, and then if we didn't like it, we just pull it all apart and make something else. And I think sometimes we do that with Jesus. We make a Jesus that we're comfortable with, a Jesus that we can live with, but that's not the real Jesus. And so we're going to challenge one another to think, am I following a Play-Doh Jesus?
We could probably buy some Play-Doh Jesus.
I bet we probably
I'm
could.
afraid that might be available.
That might exist. But we're going to be challenging one another to really take a look at who the Jesus of the Bible is, and he is radical. And some of the passages we're going to look in this is that, Jesus wasn't like interested in having this shiny mass marketing campaign. He said things like, leave somebody else to bury your family.
Right.
Come and follow me. You're not going to have anywhere to live if you come and follow me. I mean, he didn't try to make things like sound like, oh, this is going to be a super fun world.
Right,
you know?
right.
Um,
And sometimes I think we take for granted kind of that opposition thing, like, oh yeah, of course Jesus was opposed by the religious elite, but I mean, to try to really put yourself in the shoes of what was really happening in that day, I mean, it was like so countercultural. It would be very, very difficult for us to imagine like being on board with it at some level.
Yeah. And we love the Jesus that says, I came to give you peace. I came to, we have a hard time with the Jesus that said, take up your cross and follow me. And so this first week is really going to be a challenge of like, are you willing to follow the real Jesus? And if so, I think the starting point is, do you believe him in the way that he told us to live? And will you obey him? And so it's going to be a little bit in your face, I think, right out of the gate with that. And but I think we'll also be setting up this, as we go through the series, we're going to talk about what it means to be to live a radical life, to be a 3C Christ follower. And at the end of the series, we're going to challenge people to make that decision.
That's great. No, and I think using John 10:10 as well as kind of that foundation verse of saying, this isn't something that, yes, it's radical and it's countercultural and it's different than anything that you might sign up for anywhere else, but it is not something where Jesus is trying to deprive us of something.
Yes.
He actually wants us to have this life, and
he wants to have
it
us the
full.
best life possible.
right.
And so do we believe him in that?
Right.
And
Right.
yeah. All right.
That's good. I like that overview. That's good stuff. So then we're into week 2.
Yes, which is our Celebrate week. And the angle that we decided to take on this was we're kind of like, okay, as we talk about the 3 C's, we always focus on the relationship. So this is, relationship with God. And what is radical about that and what Jesus taught about that? And I think this was true in the first century, and I think it's certainly true today, that many of us have a concept of God where we see God as angry, and we feel like, he's angry about the stuff that we've done or not done, or we see God as disappointed in us, that we're just not measuring up to who he wants us to be, or maybe we see him as distant, that he doesn't really care, he's not really involved, or maybe we see him just as this like cosmic killjoy that wants to stop all our fun. But any of that, like sometimes the concept that what God really wants for us is for us to enjoy him. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to imagine that I could actually enjoy God.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're going to talk about this week looking at the passage from John 15 where Jesus talks about remaining in him, that the more that we live in this 24/7 constant connection and awareness of God, that Jesus says there in that passage, that he's telling us to do that so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. Like, what would it look like to live with just, you felt like your joy was complete? And Jesus is saying it's when you remain closely connected to me. And so we're hoping to maybe break apart some paradigms that we have and again, encourage people that if you really kind of engage in practices of celebration, understand they're not to like appease an angry God or to earn God's approval. It's like you could come to enjoy God, where your greatest joy was being with him and in his presence.
And it's a reciprocal thing, because God loves us. God enjoys
he enjoys
us.
us.
Yeah. And I love that kind of aha, because a lot of times we try to, maybe discount some of the bad vibes we get or the assumptions we make about what God thinks about us. But to actually spend some time focusing in on this concept that no, God doesn't just love us.
He enjoys you.
Yeah, he enjoys us. And so when we celebrate with him, it's something it's reciprocal. It's happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's good stuff.
And that's certainly, Jesus came and demonstrated that, showed that, John writes about God being love. That certainly was a radical, departure from the concepts and the way people related to God. And I think it still is today.
So it may be too early on this, but as far as like, are we thinking in terms of like individual weekly takeaways? Are we thinking along those lines with Celebrate, Connect, and Contribute, like next steps? or
Well,
is it?
I think it's, I think there is a nature. We don't want to simplistic make it like, oh, celebrate, have a quiet, we don't,
Right.
but yet to understand, to put those practices of celebration in the context of this is why,
Yeah.
because these are the practices that God has given us in order to grow in this enjoyment of his person.
Sure.
And so, again, it's like, will we believe, what are the things that help you stay connected in Jesus, and I think most of us, if we're honest, like I hear a lot of people say, well, when I come to church, I feel like I get recentered, or
Sure.
if I mean, it's the practices of these, some spiritual disciplines or the gathering with God's people. These are the things that help us stay kind of heart and mind connected with God. And so again, will we believe Jesus when he says, if you remain in me, if you're very intentional about that you will experience a joy that will be complete. And so if we believe him, will we obey him?
Yeah. No,
and
that's
do the
good.
things that he says to do.
No, that's good. No, I like that. And it is kind of that combination of, there are things to do, or there's ways in which to participate, but the mind-blowing concepts, can we embrace them in a way that makes those things mean so much more?
Yes.
Good. All right. So then week 3 of the series tackles a second C, and it is radical connecting.
It is connecting. And the big idea, Jesus ushered in a radical way of living where everyone belongs. And you saw that demonstrated in his life. I mean, that's what he most often got in trouble for. Why are you hanging out with those people? And so we do think that this message will lend itself also to a bit of a restore focus of the people not like us that we tend to not include and not like give a place of belonging. So we want to challenge one another to that. We have the parable he told here of the feast in the kingdom of God, and kind of like the first people that Jesus was talking about, the Jewish people, and that were rejecting him, and so then goes out into the lanes and invites all the lame and the crippled and and everybody. But this understanding that the church is meant to be a place where everybody belongs. And so connecting, I think, in that sense, is to look at how can we become that community where everybody can find that place of belonging and experience the type of Acts 2 community that we see the early church experienced. But we'll also look at that of, when Jesus began his public ministry, his first act was really to form a small group that he did life with. And so, and you look at that group, it was a very,
motley crew.
Yeah, motley crew. And you had like a tax collector and some fishermen and, a follower of Herodian and a zealot and so how can we look at being connected to one another in that way?
And this also is kind of identified this particular week for us at Community as our small group commissioning Sunday. And so again, this is just an important reminder to make sure that that's in front of us, and that we're planning appropriately for that opportunity to commission our small groups to ministry, commission them to mission, and really to hold them accountable to these things that we're saying are so important. And I think this starts to get into one of those things too, where it's like, oh, it feels like we've said that before, or it feels like, this is our line about connecting. And I think it becomes one of those things where I think vision leaks. And I think the more upfront we can be with those moments and treating them like they're the very first time, the more impactful and powerful it'll be. So.
And I do think, again, if we go a restore angle on this, I think there is a challenge even for those of us that are in small groups, because sometimes you look on in your small group and you realize, everyone belongs, but they're all just like me.
Right.
And so, I think that we have to look at ourselves even in the communities that we're forming and saying, okay, how are we creating space for people that are different than me, and how are we being intentional about that? Yeah,
absolutely. All right, and so then we're wrapping up the series on the contributing focus, and so it's radical contributing for week 4.
And as you say, sometimes things are so familiar, so I think in some ways this is familiar, but we're hoping that we breathe some fresh life into it, is that just this concept that what Jesus came to show us was that the God of the universe wants to be partners with us in carrying out his purpose in the world. And we hear that, and we're so used to saying that around, but like, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, I don't know a comparable example here, but you know, like someone big, well, everything I keep thinking to come to mind would lead us down the road of scandal. So maybe we will just go off of that. But you think of some great, powerful, rich person saying, you know, Eric, I want you to be my right-hand man in carrying this out, you know?
Right. Yeah, it doesn't make much sense.
And that doesn't even compare to thinking of God doing that.
Right.
And, you know, and so even when you think of like, I can't remember if it's in this one. Yeah. In, I don't know if we have this in here. Yeah. When John 17, when Jesus gets to, you know, John 17 is Jesus' prayer before he goes to the cross. And when you think about what he's reflecting on, like, so he's reflecting on his ministry and what's brought him to this point and where is he going. He doesn't think about all the miracles that he performed. He doesn't reflect on all the great sermons that he's given and the crafty parables that he told. No, he's thinking back on it, and he's like, I prepared the small group of disciples. And he says that my work is done because he was looking at this group, you know, that he was entrusting with the mission. And that, like, I don't know, I think we need to understand a fresh way again that how remarkable it is that God has given us that opportunity.
Yeah, it's like we can use the terms, you know, oh, we're being the hands and feet of Jesus, and we can use that so flippantly, you know, and kind of with so many assumptions, but to really take on this
Understand
idea.
how radical
that
is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It makes, I mean, at some level, like I find myself in some of these, you know, circles of prayer prior to services, and, you know, just thinking about these artists who are coming together to serve in certain ways, and yeah, it's almost ridiculous that we get to be a part of this, that we're asked to serve in this way. And I think that, you know, when people are able to understand that radical nature, it becomes so much different than, oh yeah, our church needs our help, or like, oh well, I serve in this way outside of the church walls, but I just am helping out.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you know.
No, you're on the front lines of the Jesus mission.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so when you talk about 3C commitment then for this week.
Well, before we get to that, let me just mention, you know, as we were wrestling with, okay, what is the practical piece in this?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's got to be the blessed practices. And again, I know that's somewhat familiar, but we'll also realize that I don't think we've taught on these in a year. So,
yeah, it's probably been just some passerby kind of.
Yeah, type things.
Yeah.
And so, but, you know, part of the radical way to think about this is we were thinking about that. We're like, just imagine. So what are they're about, you know, I don't know, 6,000 people that attend our church each week. So there's way more than that would call this their church home. But let's just say if 6,000 people actually decided to live out the blessed practices with 3 people, okay, and let's be conservative and say that one of those 3 people finds their way back to God next year. Next year we become 12,000.
Right.
And the next year we become 24,000.
Right.
And that, you know what it's just, it's like a movement of God, of the Jesus mission being, it's not really that complicated, but it's, are we like, again, willing to believe Jesus when he said, I'm entrusting this to you and you're going to do greater things than me, and will we obey him?
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be a thread throughout.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I think it's awesome.
But,
so go ahead about kind of a 3C commitment.
Yeah, we do think we're still trying to figure out kind of what the parameters are of this, but I do think come the end of this series we will set aside a time for people to actually make a commitment to live as a 3C Christ follower, and that to be a moment where, you know, I don't know, so you might want to think about how we could craft that moment of some moment of response where there is a participatory way for people to declare that, or to leave with some kind of reminder or sense of that.
That's good. No, I definitely think we can try to figure that out. And yeah, those tangible things, you know, become so important for our attenders, you know, as reminders, you know, stakes in the ground of that kind of a challenge, that kind of a moment.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. It's a radical life, and yeah, I think that went pretty well. I think next time maybe we have Alec and Sherry do the whole thing. I mean,
I'd be game for that.
yeah, I think it only makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see if that happens. Or I think. Oh, I'm sorry. Sherry's driving to Omaha right now. She's escaping. She has just. She's in the car
crawled
already.
away.
She crawled away, and you never saw it in the camera, but she definitely escaped. All right. Well, this has been the Big Idea Podcast. This has been Tammy. I've been Eric, and we will see you next time. So long, everybody. Boom shakalaka.
We weren't really funny in that one.